Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving into an absolutely fascinating text, Surah 50, also known as Qaf. And honestly, this isn't just a collection of verses. It's a literal masterclass in structural logic and, well, undeniable argumentation. Throughout this explainer, we're going to trace what we like to call a cosmic zoom. We're going to watch how the text seamlessly shifts our focus from the massive observable universe straight down to the invisible whispers of the human mind, and then totally zooms back out again. So let's break down exactly how this brilliant argument actually works.
Everything in this text really hinges on a single core tension. Right at the opening, the text establishes the primary conflict, which is the denier's intellectual objection to physical restoration after death. They pose this question: when we are dead and become dust, that is a distant return. Notice how this isn't just a stubborn refusal to listen, right? It's an intellectual objection based purely on observable reality. They see bodies turn to dust, and they argue that putting that dust back together is just an impossibly distant return. The entire rest of Surah 50 is the systematic structural dismantling of that exact objection. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for the cosmic zoom today. We'll start with part 1, the challenge of resurrection, move on to part 2, cosmic proof in creation, and then shift scales for part 3, the microscopic human record. After that, we'll hit the dramatic climax in part 4, piercing the perceptual veil, before wrapping up with part 5, the messenger's burden.
All right, let's kick things off with section 1, the challenge of resurrection, which sets up our core conflict. Right out of the gate, the text establishes its primary battleground, addressing the folks who outright deny the resurrection. Now, to counter this challenge, the surah builds a deeply interconnected argument. You see, these themes don't just sit isolated on the page, they operate like gears in a massive machine. First up, observable evidence makes the resurrection a logical necessity. And because it's real, divine justice absolutely has to follow. This reality then causes a human division between those who accept it and those who deny it, which ultimately requires endurance from the messenger. It's totally seamless. Moving right along to section 2, cosmic proof in creation. Let's take a look at the macro view. The text doesn't answer the deniers with some abstract high-level theology. Instead, it asks them to simply look at material reality. And this brilliantly illustrates the surah's logical method. It presents this descending cascade of physical causality. Think about it. We start with rain falling from the sky, which produces gardens, vegetation, shade, and ultimately sustenance for humanity. It's building an empirical case. I mean, if the creator can manage this incredibly complex, life-giving process from the sky all the way down to the soil, how can anyone logically deny his power to revive the dead? It just makes sense. And this brings us to a really fascinating piece of linguistic concordance. The text uses the Arabic root kha raja, which basically means to emerge or come out. But the incredible thing here is that the text uses this exact same mechanical process, the emergence of green vegetation literally bursting from dead soil, to define exactly how human bodies will emerge from the earth. By linking the botanical revival of a dead land directly to human resurrection, the text is telling us that human restoration is governed by the exact same structural laws that give us the seasonal revival of the earth. It's all connected. Now we arrive at section 3, the microscopic human record. It's time to zoom in for the micro view. Now, what's really interesting here is the profound structural zoom in the text executes. Just think about the sheer scale of the juxtaposition. On one hand, you have the vast macrocosmic scale we just talked about: skies, mountains, rain. On the other hand, a microscopic focus on our own whispered thoughts. The logical argument being made is absolutely airtight. Basically, if the creator manages the structural integrity of the massive cosmos, then tracking an individual's silent internal thoughts, that's merely a logical subset of that immense capability. If the entire universe doesn't escape his control, there is no way a passing thought does. To really emphasize this micro-focus, the text delivers this incredibly striking phrase: and we are closer to him than his jugular vein. Proximity here isn't just about spatial distance, It's defined by immediate, inescapable access to knowledge and control. It illustrates an absolute internal tracking system of human intent. The divine awareness sits closer to the human than, actually scratch that, it's more like it's woven deeper into us than our own physical anatomy. And the text gets incredibly specific about how this is recorded. It uses the Arabic root la fa za, which means to cast out or utter. It's describing a dual recording system, guardian angels positioned right and left, that captures absolutely every single fleeting phonetic sound wave cast out by the human.
There's literally no escaping it. Every single utterance is logged.
This perfectly sets up Section 4, piercing the perceptual veil. This is, without a doubt, the undeniable climax of the text. So, after establishing the massive cosmos and that inescapable microscopic record, the text moves right to the boundary of death. It directly addresses the individual standing at this edge, saying, "You were heedless of this. Now we have removed your veil." This is a pivotal, terrifying shift in perception. The unseen world suddenly, violently almost, becomes empirical reality. Let's look at the specific language used here, because it's super important. The text refers to this removed covering as a gita. In the lexical framework of the text, a gita is a covering, whether physical or metaphorical, that totally prevents accurate assessment. Up until the very moment of death, the human perspective has been obstructed by this conceptual veil, completely blocking out the absolute truth of that recording system and the impending evaluation we just talked about. So what replaces this veil? The text states that the sight becomes hadid. This root literally means iron or sharpness. It denotes an unyielding, piercing accuracy of vision. So the removal of that soft, obscuring khita results in sight that is as sharp and hard as hadid. The individual transitions instantly from a state of speculative denial into sharp, inescapable, empirical certainty. The unseen is now fully, undeniably observable. It's a real game changer. All right, let's move to our final section, Part 5, the messenger's burden. Here is where we find our resolution. We've zoomed from the vast cosmos down to the human psyche, right up to the sensory climax of death. Now the text zooms back out to the macro-historical timeline. It essentially divides humanity into two distinct camps based purely on how they receive these structural proofs. First, you have active rejection, people who actively deny the truth and turn away. And then receptive obedience, those who truly hear and turn toward the message. The response to the evidence is simply a reflection of the individual's internal state. So the crucial point is this: what is the messenger actually supposed to do when faced with all this denial? Well, the surah defines the messenger's role with incredible clarity. The messenger is not there to force belief or compel anyone's compliance. No way. Their duty is simply to endure patiently, rely on continuous remembrance, and remind the people using the text itself. The burden rests entirely in the clear delivery of the message, not in the final outcome. To really anchor this duty, the text uses the root sabara, meaning to be patient. But it pairs this patience with a physical rhythm, instructing the messenger to engage in continuous remembrance before sunrise and before sunset. Think about that. This rhythmic devotion, tied directly to the physical rotation of the earth, serves as the ultimate structural antidote to human resistance. You literally find patience by aligning yourself with the cosmic rhythm the Creator set in motion. If we have to distill the singular core message of Surah 50, the whole shebang, it is this: human dissolution into dust is not an end. It's just a temporary phase within a continuous, meticulously recorded cycle of creation and restoration. The text builds this flawless logical proof by analogy, completely binding the material cosmos and the metaphysical record into one unified system. Just as the rain brings the dead earth back to life, so too will the Creator restore the human being for a final, perfect evaluation. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a question to ponder. Knowing how deeply connected the macrocosmos is to our microscopic internal reality, how does this ancient structural logic change the way you view the natural world around you? The next time you see rain hit dry earth or watch the sun rise and set, consider the immense, perfectly recorded system that you are a part of. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep exploring.